So, our conversation was around the culture. We talked about, this course is about teamwork, and I sort of put a question in there around what's the culture of your agency, and you said you'd been thinking about that this morning. And so, and just about you started off talking about anchors, generally, what that organization means.
Yeah, and I think, the culture of an organization can really define the way that you function as a team, and it can also be something that externally people recognize you to be as an organization.
Yes.
So, and a particular culture within an organization, you can have a culture that doesn't necessarily serve you, and can be, damaging for everybody involved, the organization, the staff, the folks that use the services, most importantly. But, I think in terms of anchors, we've been sort of asking, we're heading into a strategic planning process, and we've been asking ourselves, how are we seen as an organization, and how do we see ourselves in terms of a movement? Are we leading a movement? Are we recognized as such? We work from harm reduction philosophy and framework, and we're realizing that we're probably most well recognized as being a social justice organization. We really believe in bringing anti-oppressive practice to the work that we do. And does that ring true for others? So in the strategic planning process that we're going through, we're putting out some questions to our partners, to folks that use the services, and to staff as well about that. And I think in terms of any kind of negative culture that arises within an organization, we have to stay conscious in the way that we approach everything in the work that we do. I really feel that. And so, how does that look, sort of practically speaking, on the ground? I think, we always have to foster opportunities to dialogue on these sorts of things in a way that, there's a sense of openness and people can voice their opinions, that we can challenge each other in an atmosphere of respect and understanding.
And you spoke about how an experience early in your career kind of set the stage for you in terms of your understanding of leadership. It sounds like you had quite an amazing mentor.
Yes, absolutely. Early on in my work life, I worked at a shelter for homeless women and children in Kingston, Ontario. And the director of the organization was, she really fostered a sense of inclusion and open dialogue, and she was a very strong feminist, and so that really came through in her approach, and that we were all involved in the decision making and setting policies and protocols for the organization. And I feel like when I think about leadership, I really she set the bar high, so I really feel like I have been striving. But I've also always kind of considered myself to be a reluctant leader.
That's interesting.
I've never, I definitely would never want to take on an authoritarian cloak in terms of a leadership style. I don't think people function well. Most of us don't.
And maybe it's that reluctant leadership, that reluctance to be, the reluctant leadership kind of piece that you talked about, that keeps you from moving into that place of wanting to be the one in charge.
Yeah. And I think it's, I think, you know, there's something about, well, definitely in terms of my role within the organization, there are times and, you know, as the job description calls for, where I need to take, you know, clear leadership, right? And that's important. But I also feel like we function well as an organization where each member of the team takes on leadership in a particular way. You know, sometimes those things are very clearly recognizable, and at other times, you know, might be more subtle, depending on a person's skill and experience and expertise. But I think that's really, that shared model of leadership is really important. And I mean that in terms of staff and board and people that use the services, you know, and, you know, fostering opportunities for folks who use the services to be involved in the work of the organization and in the leadership of the organization. So it's constantly being...
How do you do that? How do you bring those that are using the organization in as part of it? Like, do they sit on your board? Do they...
Yeah, and you know, Anchors has existed for 20 years. The culture of the movement really has its roots in the early AIDS movement, which is an activist movement, which is a movement around social justice. And you know, I think that those are where our roots are. And you know, we've grown in different ways from those roots, but we always remember that that's where we came from. And in terms of HIV and AIDS, we talk about GIPA, so and MIPA, which is greater involvement of people living with HIV and AIDS. And we also, you know, user groups across the country have created a document a number of years ago called Nothing About Us Without Us. So, you know, it's the belief that, you know, if there's something that affects your life, then you need to be involved in at every level, including policy decision making. And so, you know, we need to ensure in a very conscious way that that's happening in our organization. So yes, people who use the services are on the board. You know, people are called upon to participate in feedback and needs assessments for our programs, for our strategic plans, you know, to co-facilitate workshops or to facilitate workshops, to provide trainings around peer leadership. So yeah, all of those things are important.
So I'm going to pause this for a minute here, and then we're going to come back and talk about, I wanted to talk a little bit more about agents of change that we talked about